All right, welcome everybody to our session called Data on the Brink. There is, please add your name to the notes. The notes are going to be collaborative and you can just take them in line with the agenda. I appreciate everybody showing up. Just want to give you a quick few reminders. I assume that most of us know how to use Zoom by this point. We are going to be utilizing it. We will be using breakout rooms. Please feel free to use the chat. The notes are linked through Kiko chat in that notes document. There's going to be links to other things that we'll be using. Please take notes in the document. I am incapable of running a session and taking notes, and so please help me remember what all we're doing. I also do want to remind everybody that by participating in this, you agreed to ESET's community participation guidelines. And these are not just things not to do, these are expectations we have of you to be welcome and opening and understanding of differing needs. That said, if you have any sort of issue, or including you can't see the slides, you can't access the slides, I'm talking too fast, I'm talking too slow, my cat is on camera, whatever. If you, this is Bridget, by the way, she very much likes to participate. Please let us know, and we will do our best to fix anything. You can reach out to me or Steve, any of the ESET fellows, any of the ESET staff, if you have any sorts of issues, challenges, what have you. So goals of the session briefly is that we want stuff from you. This is more, we want stuff from you, and we want your participation. We've got some things that we want your feedback on. And we also want to share and document stories of improving data findability and accessibility for reuse. All right, with that, Steve and I are going to kind of do a tag team presentation just to give you guys a little bit of background. After we go over some of the background, what we're going to do then is eventually we're going to go into breakouts, and the breakouts where we're going to try to identify some priority data sets and then report back. And then we're going to talk about what criteria might be important to help prioritize looking at those data sets. And so, any questions, comments, concerns, favorite colors, dance routines? Nope. Hopefully Bridget doesn't disconnect us today. Yes, John got to experience Bridget kicking me out of a Wonder Circle last night. All right, I am going to share my screen so we can start on. Yep. All right. Of course, hold on, of course I started, and we're done because I started on the wrong slide. There we go. Let's try this again. All right, we see the title slide. Primarily, this is going to be presented by me and Steve, but we couldn't be doing this without a host of other people. We've got a lot of this work is, some of the stuff that we're going to be presenting is related to work that we've done in Flint, Michigan, primarily through connections that Steve has made with the Healthy Flint Research Coordinating Center, and I'll let Steve take over on some of these others.
Yep, so Data for Black Lives, of course, ESEP, and Denise and I are co-chairs for the Improving Data Access and Reusability task group under CODATA, which is the International Science Council. Next slide, please.
Yes. Ow. Bridget,
So
that
we
hurt.
were starting at the end. It's a very tenant presentation where the end is the beginning. All right, so we're at the setting the stage part, and Denise has already gone over the rights. We'll go over the rights and responsibilities, and then we go into breakouts. Our breakouts are really intended to be casual conversations about things which we believe the best ideas will come from. We're gonna go through and identify priority data sets, pet data sets that you may know about, things that you may suspect exist, things that you know are sort of on the brink, things that are going to be lost. I'm going to tell you about 2 data sets that are on the brink for different reasons to kind of prime the pump and give you an example of what we're talking about here. What our objective is in all of this is we are really expanding this task group and working with ESEP, and we want to build a resource so that people that do these things, like looking at the data from Flint, Michigan, that continues to be in the news, and these HOV, the Alvin submersible videos, these things that are on the brinks, they get rescued, that they're resourced, and that these data and information are available to all of the stakeholders. So next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to go into our first breakout while you guys are still fresh and optimistic. This is test of breakout room sizes, which works for us. And so don't put too much into this. None of this stuff is graded. So don't, what are we actually doing? Make it up as you go along, but here's the general guidelines. So you're going to go into breakout rooms to get to know each other, really. And it's going to be kind of short. And we're going to have you briefly report out. We'll just pick people and ask you what you thought was interesting in there. It goes like this. So you introduce yourself, as most people with manners do, give your name and your affiliation, and then give don't tell me what your title is, or not me, but your people in your breakout. You're going to say what you actually do. So in my job, I actually take direction from Carolina, and sometimes I actually get data done, but most times I'm building community and looking at interesting tomorrow technologies to try to get the data center to move forward, and trying to bring data into this data center of deep ocean data. Was what I work on and I passionately do. My title is something completely different. So that's the kind of description that you want to give people, so they know what, why you're at ESEP and what you actually do. Then in 3 rounds, okay, so after you introduce yourself, you're going to go and say, the first or best music concert I ever attended was, and it's still popcorn style, meaning that if Matt and Carolina are in a breakout together, whoever is saying the best concert I went to was and explaining that, then picks the next person who goes. That's what we mean by popcorn style. You have 3 questions. So you're going to go in 3 rounds to include everybody. The first is that music concert I attended. You can pick first or best or both. And then round 2 gets a little interesting, because it's like, I'm currently procrastinating on, and my list is very, very long. I'd have to actually think about it to get something interesting that I'm procrastinating on, but it tells a lot about me and what I want to do, what I like to do. And then there's the one where we uncover a bit of your past, and we say a story I lived to tell that happened to me when I was, and for me, I was in New Zealand and I bungee jumped, and I have acrophobia, and it was like one of the worst things to do, and I thought I had just committed suicide, and I lived to tell the tale. So I put my stuff out there in a way of sharing. Let's keep this fun and keep it light. You're gonna have 15 minutes. So if we can get I forget who's in charge of breakout rooms.
I'm
You got
just
it?
about to do that, but before I'm doing that, I'm putting the questions in chat.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. If you can go ahead and copy those into chat. And I can go from room to room and remind you guys of what we're talking about here. You also have access to the slides from the Kiko chat, the embedded Google Doc. There's a link in there, so if you forget, but just start. You should remember who you are, and maybe you're thinking about that music concert that you went to. All right, are we ready to roll?
Hold on. Yep, got them in there. All right. I just assigned randomly, so there we go. Let's go.
Okay, you'll be sucked into breakout rooms in we'll see you there.
All right.
Where are the other 15 people?
Welcome back. Do you?
It'll take a minute because I closed the rooms.
Oh,
so
okay.
they get 58 seconds or a minute to get zoomed back. You all were just prompt and left on your own because you're
It's a funny thing about Zoom, when you come back from a breakout, you're whatever state you're in, audio on, camera on, and you get back in plenary and you're like, oh, gotta hide.
I don't know what you're talking about, Steve.
Matt. Well, I wasn't gonna say anything, Matt, but you just outed yourself. So fun. People are still laughing. Boy, there's something good happening.
I love
Just
seeing that when people are coming back from these breakouts, that they're smiling or laughing or otherwise feeling engaged. Susan, unmute because you really
I was right at the climax of the story.
I was gonna
of
say,
something
I
I
missed it.
survived and then
No.
was snatched out. So now they don't know if I lived or died, right?
well, you'll just have to share it with the whole group then.
Well, I'll save
Yeah,
this for
so
mine,
popcorn style, Susan Shingledecker, what did you live to tell the tale? Let's have it. While Denise cues up the slides.
but
This is better than lounge
during
music.
my graduate school research in Botswana on sustainable tourism, I found myself on the border of Botswana and Zambia, and my ride was not coming to me, and it was getting dark, and I realized I was sitting under a tree with a bunch of smugglers, and I had to decide to stay under the tree with the smugglers and wait for my ride, or to take a taxi that would hopefully take me where I was going. And I opted for the taxi, and 2 minutes into the ride, his friend jumps into the car, and I think this is not looking good for me. And just as I was looking at how fast should the car be going when I jump out of it, while it's moving, the safari van came in the other direction, and we flagged them down, and I got on the safari truck, and I was on my way.
Susan Shingledecker, this is Danny Kincaid. We're going to talk about your Botswana story, and Steve's going to be in the room when it happens because
See, I knew this was going to happen.
He and I
This is
have a
what
great
happens, you
Botswana
live
story,
long enough.
and I did not use it in my breakout group. And so, where are my breakout group friends? I am so sorry. I have a crazy Botswana near-death experience, just like Susan. Who knew that there could be more than one? And Steve knows all about it. And all I can say to this entire group is that I knew Steve made these breakout questions when it came to the last question in the breakout group. So I will end there. Thank you for allowing me to share that. And thank you for sharing yours, Susan. That was great.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks a lot, Susan. When I heard Botswana smugglers sitting alone, I thought, oh, Danny will never bring this up. So yeah, so there it is. The all sorted tells the tale. All right, Denise, do we have slides?
Yes, we do. I'm getting ready to share my screen again and start the presentation again. I hope that was a fun exercise and you learned a little bit about maybe yourself as well as other people in the group. All right, so.
Or you got a sandwich, either way.
Yeah, food is important.
It is for what we're about to ask you to do, because the rest of this ain't gonna be fun.
Oh, it's gonna be lots of fun.
It's gonna be great. It'll be great.
All right, you're seeing slides.
All right, yeah. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the Flint water crisis. This is a work that was done for the Improving Data Access and Reusability group in conjunction with the Community Data cluster in ESEP. And so if you don't know the story, we'll go through this pretty quickly. In 2014, after a history of having tap water problems, Flint, Michigan changed their water source to with an interim city manager to a cost-saving resource, the Flint River, instead of the Detroit treated water, which was going to save them some money. It basically affected 100,000 residents. Between 6,000 and 12,000 children were exposed to lead in drinking water. Next slide, please. That wasn't the only problem. It started to corrode the pipes because there was a different pH. After a whole bunch of national attention, the city switched back to Detroit in 2015, but the damage was done. President Obama went out and said, we're all done here, drank a glass of water in front of other people. And then the next year they started replacing, or later that year, they started replacing the infrastructure in Flint. Now, if you don't know about Flint, Flint was basically a town built by GM for the factory workers who were building cars in the 50s, 40s, late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so if you go there, you can tell everything's on a grid, and it looks like, building, looks a lot like military housing. Next slide, please. So the ongoing part is that they still don't know from day to day whether they're going to turn on their tap and they're going to get rusty water. There's been longstanding distrust in the community. They've always had water problems, as it's sort of a built on the fly community to serve an industry. And what we don't talk about here, but a little thing that will give you kind of a little depth about the crisis, is the corrosion of the pipe set up a little bit of turbulence. And in those little pockets in the city water pipes, water was able to stagnate. And long story short, they ended up having a Legionnaire's disease problem that killed about a dozen people and made a bunch of other people sick. So it wasn't just the lead, the sort of the longitudinal problem of having lead in your water when you're growing up as a child, but also people had immediate effects. And much like any other public health crisis, people that were vulnerable suffered the most. So lack of access to these data, when I got involved, some of you may know Lynn Yarmy, who was my original co-chair in community data. We started looking for the data and could not find it at the EPA. After a couple of FOIA requests, we were able to get the data into the community data cluster from the state of Michigan. And then we had a Do-A-Thon last summer where we started assessing the fit for science of these data. And it turned out we have really good, and this is why we are at ESET. There's great people who can look at those data in terms of methods and quality control, whether they have flags, all the things that we know how to do well. Turns out these data are not fit for use. You really can't make any statements about water quality long-term, even though they're sampling. And we had a couple of higher ups that were feds that didn't necessarily go on record that said, yeah, this looks like a case of just testing to check a box. So this is the type of things that we want to deal with, not only in various clusters, because I'll be working with data stewardship coming up, but we want to work across organizations like CoData and Force 11 and other groups where we can get some perspective on these things and maybe give back to these communities all over the country, whether it's groundwater problems because of oil or fracking. We have expertise in ESET and these other groups that doesn't exist out in the public domain. Next slide, please. So here's a little timeline just to give you a visual of how long this entire process has taken place. I ended up going to Flint last year in defying the COVID moment. Flew out there and met with some of the community people. They gave me side eye for about 3 days until I gained their trust and they started telling me their stories. Turns out that there was a research group there before that actually sued them for their data. So a research group came in from one of the universities in Florida, saw that this was sort of somebody could build their tenure off of analyzing these data and writing papers. When the community members wanted their data back, they sued them and all the principals at the various universities for $3 million. And so they were a little bitter about having yet another person who represents any academic organization coming in and saying, hey, I think I can help. And that's an ongoing process. There is no neat and tidy end to this. It is ongoing. Next slide, please. So we're still collaborating with them. That's the table with all the community activists out there. Some of them have been working on this water problem for better parts of 20 years. And we have a pretty good working relationship. I attend their community meetings on Fridays sometimes and give updates. So working with the community requires immersion in the community, as I'm sure that Susan and other people who have worked in remote locations, you got to become part of that community to help solve the problems. And it ends up being something a little bit different than what you expect going in. Next slide, please. Okay, so I have been talking to, some of you know Lisa Raymond. She's been at ESET meetings many times. And I believe that Deb is on the call. Deb, if you don't want to talk about this, that is fine. Deb is from the Woods Hole Library. I think Deb is still on the call, maybe.
I'm on the call.
Yay,
Hi.
there she is.
Audrey, my coworker, worked on this, so I'm not really that familiar with what she was doing in this project.
Well, we can tag team it up. We're not
Okay.
that formal here.
Sounds good.
So if you don't know, Alvin is a deep submersible. It always at Scripps we have mad submersible envy because we don't have anything that goes underwater except people. But Alvin made a name for itself in the mid 60s, going really deep down in the Marianas Trench and Challenger Deep and other places. They have a very extensive set of recordings, video recordings and film recordings that go back into the early 60s. To my knowledge, the Hui Data Library applied for a grant with a group called the Council on Library and Information Resources. They have a recordings at risk program, which kind of mirrors the data at risk program. And they got about almost 50 grand to digitize. And here's where the real story is, having to prioritize the materials that were most at risk. And then there was some dive footage around 1980. Next slide. Please. Forgot to say please. Sorry, I don't have a 5-year-old anymore. I lost all my manners. So when you have a little kid, you're like, oh, I got to model good behavior. So when they're a teenager, you just got to model like getting out of bed. So search for the lost hydrogen bomb was 66. I don't know about Project Famous. Deb, do you have any insights on Project Famous?
Unfortunately, I don't.
We're going to skip right over that. And then the discovery and the exploration of the hydrothermal vents. I do remember that because some of that footage ended up being on Jacques Cousteau when I was when I was a teenager. We won't talk about that. What's interesting about this is the formats go all the way from Super 8, 16 millimeter, there's VHS and pneumatic, about 500 different data sets. And you can see the context there, Lisa, Audrey, Deb's coworker. And what I didn't know, I actually talked to Audrey, Deb, and apparently this is a big thing in data rescue, is do you do the work yourself or do you rely on experts? And I guess you guys decided to rely on the expertise of a group called Mass Productions, I think the name of the group
Yes,
is, that did the digitization.
And they're still working on it, but we definitely had to figure out what was the most at risk format and what was the most at risk for the dives.
Yeah, so that you know, this, I was in casual conversation with Lisa and this came up, and we decided to bring it in because it's so relevant to the work that we're doing in this session. Next slide, please.
All right.
Over to Denise.
So one of the other things that we're working on with the IDAR task group with CoData, and we think is really relevant to any sort of data rescue, data conservation efforts, is we really should be looking at the responsibilities and rights of people with respect to data. And in this case, in the context to ensure data access and reusability. You've seen, you can almost think of this like a code of conduct related to data, but it's a little bit more than that. It's a bit more aspirational than concrete task. And so with this, there is an increased demand for open, accessible, and reusable data for multiple uses. Data is usually collected for one particular use. And so you need to understand the context in which that data was collected to understand whether it's fit for purpose. this accessibility and reusability of data can literally be a matter of life and death, as we see with what's going on with Flint, with the Flint data. You may also see that with other environmental situations. You know, you can think of it with even structural engineering type things. So the guidelines and codes of conduct are broadly for ethical professional conduct, but for the most part, they do not explicitly address data management, conservation, and reuse. By the way, I often use the term conservation rather than rescue with data because people often have a negative reaction to the term rescue, that they think something has been done wrong. And it is not necessarily that something has been done wrong. It's just, you know, media deteriorates, even if you have, you know, the best preservation methods. You use the best standards for the time. Or you use the standards that were appropriate for what the data was originally used for, but there might be other standards to make that data more relevant. So we have kind of some statements about rights and responsibilities related to particular groups of people, whether we call them stakeholders groups or rights holders or obligations, people with obligations. I'm not quite sure of what the best term is, because stakeholder isn't quite right. Right now, we've just looked at these 5 groups. We know that we're missing groups. We will start adding some more as we go through it. And there's going to be some commonalities between each of these groups. But there's also things that are very specific to each group. So for researchers, open and fair, as ethically possible. And that ethically is important. We heard a lot from the Indigenous Communities panel yesterday. You know, the work that we've been doing, that Steve in particular has been doing, Flint, develop, use, and update as needed data management plans for their research data, work with data professionals throughout the data lifecycle, clearly communicate any restrictions, for example, any sort of ethical considerations on access to their data, and be aware of and implement leading practices for their specific types. This, hopefully, nothing here is controversial for those of us in the room. So data professionals should, again, these should be fairly obvious to you, be acknowledged for the critical role that they play. They need the recognition. We need to make them, we need to elevate them, proactively reach out to researchers to ensure appropriate data management, help researchers identify appropriate repositories, and assist as needed in identifying leading practices for various types of data. Again, hopefully nothing too out there. So institutions should have access to data generated from the researchers and projects that they support. They need to recognize the long-term value of research data and support researchers and data professionals in appropriate data practices through financial and other resources. Funders have access to data generated from researchers and projects they support, assist researchers in developing, and ensure that repositories are supported for long-term sustainability. Community members, this is where we're starting maybe to get into things that we haven't necessarily been thinking about quite as explicitly. Community members should have access to data that impacts their community and have access to that data in a way that is useful for them. That's a big ask. Community members should be able to connect with researchers, data professionals, and institutions to utilize data for resiliency. So this is a little bit different perspective. And these people have rights to data, and they should be able to access and use those to make decisions that impact their community. That's all to help set the stage for what we're doing for our breakouts. And so for our breakouts, Steve, do you want to take the lead again?
Sure, no problem. So for our breakouts, it's pretty loosely defined. It's not going to be nearly as exhilarating as finding out about the time that somebody died. But what we can talk about is there are probably data sets in your chosen field, in your science domain, that you're aware of and that need improved access or reusability, that need conserving or out and out rescue. There may actually, in some cases, be something wrong with the data, or in the case of the video data for the Alvin submersible, there's nothing wrong with them. It was recorded on 16mm and it was properly archived, but it's really hard to put those that information on the web without digitizing it. And then of course you have to resource that. I know that for BecoDemo and for CCHGO, the two ocean repositories that are attending this session, there are plenty of older data that could use a little love, but they don't count high enough on the priority list because we only have limited resources in terms of funding and knowledgeable people with the expertise to bring those data into use. So whether you're in seismology or volcanology, geology, core samples, we want to go into the breakouts and nominate some data sets that you know of that may need attention, that has to do with the data on the brink that need to be brought back. These data may not have been born digital. They may be gray, meaning digital and stuffed away in a drawer or in some obscure website. So make the case for them. We want you to, there's a link there. And if you go to the slides that are available through Kiko Chat, you can also click there as well.
And I just dropped it in chat.
Thank you very much. So the instructions, if you go to the slide itself, the very first thing that you should know is that you want to copy one of those slides and for your own use. So don't copy the instruction slide unless you need to. You can copy it if you need to. But each breakout room will have a parallel discussion on a topic given in the main meeting. And that topic for us is nominating a data set and then justifying why it's a data set on the brink and how you might go about bringing those data into use, and use the other people in your breakout group as resources to bounce ideas off of. Make sure that you copy the slide that says this is a template and then use it for your own. Put the names of the people that are in there and maybe elect a person who can be a moderator / recorder. There will be a report out at the end. Again, don't overthink it. It's not graded. You know, we want to have fun in the process of actually collecting this information and doing something worthwhile. And you'll have that action as a report out. Denise, what do we want to give this about 20 minutes? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds good. I will try to bounce around a little bit and
Same here.
check in with you. So, all right, I am about to open the rooms. They're random, so you may be with different people. And so go to it.
See you in 20 minutes.
Susan, you're currently, oh, there you go.
I just assigned her a new room. Yeah, no, I was trying to find rooms that didn't have as many.
Yeah.
How are we doing? What does the distribution look like on the rooms? Pretty good. About 3 to 4 in each room.
3 to 4, yeah.
That's a really good number.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep. So I think I'm just going to hang here, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang out here for a little bit.
Yeah, let them do the work for a bit. So,
Yep.
All right, but I am also going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, that's probably good.
There we go.
Well, Allison, how do you think this is going so far?
You're muted.
Every time. You'd think after like 2 years of Zoom, It
It's the
feels like
web
all it's
snooze drinking
worse.
game. You know, you're muted. Take a shot.
Yeah, take a
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah.
And in this case, you have to take a shot of coffee. But
Yeah, it seems like it's going well. It seems like, building some camaraderie with everybody is a really great and human way to start some of these conversations. So thank you both for framing it around that.
Yeah. Well, because, Steve and I have been doing work in this area for a long time. And it's amazing the number of people who will pull you aside and say, oh, I've got this story, or, oh, I've got this story, because they have been taught that it's shameful that your data isn't in the best shape. It's like we did a beautiful AGU session in the before times called Dirty Stories of Data Rescue, where we wanted those ugly stories, and we got them because we reached out to specific people, but we got a lot of people who were just so willing to air some of their dirty laundry so other people could do better. And that's really one of our goals that in a lot of the work that Steve and I have been doing in the past few years related to this, is that let's share what's worked, let's share what hasn't worked. And, and the only way that you can actually do that is to be human to everybody else. And so
the
kind
other
of
thing, Allison, is that I think everybody's super tired of remote meetings. And so if you can, the thing that Denise and I were talking at AGU a few weeks ago, and what a breath of fresh air to see people to say, hey, do you want to go out to get something to eat? Or we were unfortunately at somebody's memorial service, but even then it was a community activity of a bunch of people who knew Peter. Who know Peter, lives on in our mind. But that just wouldn't have been the same with us doing it over Zoom. It just, and I said then, I just waited to grieve until I could see everybody who knew Peter. And, I think one of the things, the strength of the ESET meeting is partially in the sessions, the informal, it's a step down in formality from AGU because there's not like 12.5 minutes and then the green and yellow and red lights and then you move to the next speaker. There's a lot of interactivity in the session. I remember in DC, it was the last time we were in the Renaissance, and Adam Shepard's computer stopped working. And so we went to the computer store together and sat in the back of the session. I took his computer apart while we were in the interoperability session. And he was sitting there looking at me like I had just flown in from Mars with space age technology. He was like, how do you know how to do that? I was like, this was my life when I worked for the Navy. I repaired stuff. But you wouldn't see that at AGU. Somebody repairing a computer, participating in the session, because everybody felt very at home with each other. Large groups of people go out to dinner together, just kind of take over, especially when we were in DC, right there
like in downtown DC.
Right here on DuPont. So a lot of this ESET culture was built that way. And and I think many of us, me and Danny and I used to work together. She used to be here in San Diego, but I met Denise through ESET, Peter through ESET, Carl, Ruth. It just goes on and on and on and on. And they become more than colleagues. They're really trusted companions, really, on this journey, because the data part of earth science is so, at least in the last few years, it's starting to come into sharper focus, but it was so undefined. You weren't quite a principal investigator science, which a lot of the stuff is geared toward. We want to push a lot of the funding opportunities toward those people. You're not a technician per se, or that might be part of your job. In Denise's case, she's a director and she's got science responsibilities, and she has administrative responsibilities to a government agency. And so you don't see those people everywhere, and everybody can come together in ESET and go, you're my people. You get me. You get that it's not, I can't even explain what I do to my family. because they go, oh, that's the computers and the ocean. And I don't sit at the bottom of the ocean with a laptop. That just, but you don't know how to explain yourself when you come to ESET. You're like, oh man, I've been working with these data and we have to apply these FAIR principles. And people are like, yeah, I know. What do you do when you have this data set that has this DOI and they put the data in the document and then you can't share it because of the licensing agreement? You're like, I know, it's the worst. And so pretty soon you're out drinking martinis till 3 a.m. talking about somebody who's put their, data inside of a licensed document that has no commercial sharing.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I have attended sessions where it's essentially been data therapy. It's like a therapy session. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in this. I have people who understand my trouble. And, so it's always been, it's been a really interesting, it's such an amazing group. It's like, yes, I'm tired of online. However, the online experience with ESET is better than online experience with any other meeting that I've done. And part of it is because it is most sessions. And, it's like, I am so grateful. And this is something I've told Susan. I'm so grateful that the relationship with Charlie and Fisher got started and that it's continuing, because I've seen sessions shift so much in the past 2 years. There were already sessions like Steve and I almost always whenever we've done a session, it's been this chaotic, passing the baton, very interactive sort of thing. Because that's one of the ways that he and I work well, is in that very collaborative and cutting people each other off and going, oh yeah, no, that reminds me of that, that very, everybody has a voice at the table. But there were also some very traditional, oh, hey, we have an hour and a half. We're going to have 6 15-minute presentations.
But even the plenary, I think, has evolved. The first time we did a ESET plenary. I mean, this plenary had, 4 panelists who were interacting. I've never been in a plenary, I don't think, that has had a breakout sessions.
I liked that.
That was great. That was genius.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, and it's a brave move, because you don't know if that's going to work. There's a lot of people show up to the plenary. It's like, tell me about life, right? I'm going to sit back here on my side with my computer, and you're going to just super impress me with, unlocking the secrets of life. And none of us are that smart or that good, over Zoom. No. Unless you're like, here's how to make $1 million by lifting your index finger. It's like, okay, I'm all ears.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. But short of that, everything else is death by PowerPoint or droning on about stuff. And I went to a session yesterday, and I won't say who it was, but it was a good session, had lots of potential. But it was, I have to give you a PowerPoint presentation, almost like a contractual obligation. Is you're the communications director, right? And so when you're however you have to communicate with people. If I have to walk, with my students, they're not back yet, but we talk about technical problems about walking down to the beach. If I need to sit over their shoulder, sure, there's plenty of time for that. Well, let me get to know you as a person so I understand your question in context of who you are. And the first time I did that, my boss, who's a couple doors down, he's retired now. He says, why are you befriending these people? It's like, I'm not, A, what's wrong with that? But B, we're asking them to do a pretty tough job with no education. We have to educate them. And I can't tell you what to do unless I know you. And so with that, I'm going to skip around to the breakout rooms and see how they're doing. How are we doing on time? We got about 5 minutes left or a little more?
I don't remember. I started the timer late. So I only set it for 15 minutes. And so we've got about 10 minutes actually.
Okay. I wish breakout rooms had a knock door feature, so you don't just
Yeah.
drop in on people. Can you
Yeah.
imagine if you're sitting in a meeting room and people just materialize in the middle of your discussion? It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
I always say that breakout rooms are like stepping on wormholes, because when they decide to shuttle you back, you just like, zoop, you get sucked into another room against your will. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm gonna go and torment Susan's room.
There you go. Can you assign yourself, or do I need to move? No, he's got it.
Yeah.
I'm never quite sure with the hosts if they actually have that level of control.
It does. I noticed because as soon as you created the breakout rooms, it popped up the box for me.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I can
and
see
so
all of it, but I don't think I have quite. I don't see like the timer or anything like.
I didn't set a timer. It didn't give me an option to actually set a timer.
Oh,
or-
you can do it.
or at least
under-
I didn't see it.
It's totally buried. You have to like click through twice, so it's under
Okay.
options, and then there's one of the sub things that then has
Okay.
a pop out. Yeah, it's very.
Yeah. No, it's like, but it gives the 60 seconds when you say close all rooms. And I do have the broadcast message to all. And so I did just broadcast, hey, you've got about 10 minutes.
Yes.
Because I think that to me, I kind of like I like setting the timer, but at the same time, I like giving them a little bit more freedom, particularly if you're jumping in and out of rooms to kind of see where people are. If they're like really engaged, then I'm like, okay, well, let's leave them. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's been one of the things that Steve and I really, he and I work well together because we think kind of the same way on that. I'm like, we're not going to artificially end the conversation just because we said that this is only going to go for 20 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to.
Yeah. No, exactly. I love baby goats, by the way. I'm gonna have to start posting some photos from the farm. I'm not sure if I have. I'm sure I have some goat pictures. I have a lot of horse pictures and some chicken pictures.
Yeah.
Some ducks.
Yeah. I was inspired by you, and I'm glad. Sometimes you hear from other people what you're telling yourself in your own head, but sometimes when you hear it from someone else, it's like, yeah. So I appreciate Steve's affirmation that you meet people where they're at and that it's okay
Yes.
to befriend them. Like it's
Yes.
one of my jobs is, bringing some of that person to person kind of communication. So I
Yeah.
was feeling inspired by you both and ended up scheduling a post to promote ESET Pets in the Slack.
Oh, good. Yay. Because it is. It's. I mean, the past 2.5 years. Oh gosh, past far too long. There have been positives. People have gotten more humanized.
Mhm.
It's like people get excited when they see Bridget on the calls. Leslie Wyborn is upset if I'm calling from home and Bridget does not make an appearance.
Mhm.
She feels personally offended. But helping people understand their giving glimpses into your own life helps humanize you and makes it easier for people to go, to be more compassionate and to have empathy. And I think that's something that was being lost a little bit, that people were so compartmentalized that it was hard for people to, it's like, it's like, why are you having all of these? It's like, why can't you get such and such done? I'm like, well, my life is falling apart and elsewhere, kind of thing. I'm
Maybe
sorry.
because the world is kind of
Right. Yeah.
right now.
Right. But now, I think in general, most people tend to seem to be more understanding of that. And it's like one of the things I love so much about ESET is just learning about different people's pathways to how they got where they are, because there's a lot of quote non-traditional pathways here. Steve doesn't have a PhD, one of the smartest people and one of the best experts I know. Ruth, same thing. You know, and the fact that, you know, she's one of the most respected people in data science, in geoscience data. Yeah, it's just like, in all of this, it's
Yeah.
nice to see.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. I will hop. Maybe I'll go peek in. See, what room should I peek in? I'll go. So is there a way for me to leave the room back to the main room if I join a
Yes.
breakout room? Okay. Yes. No, actually, I think I remember that now. I think I
can
do
you
remember.
at least have that ability as a co-host? And there's
Yeah.
also a way to change it in options too.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go jump in and see, since we've got just a few minutes left. All right.
Cool. Hello again. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, it returns you to the main room muted. I forget that. All right, I'm going to broadcast that we're going to wrap up. All right. Bless you.
My office companion is.
Yeah, I keep expecting my daughter to walk in. Often when I'm on a call and she's here doing schoolwork, she'll come and just deliver a cat. And just walk back out. But I think she might be in class right now. So she's doing, schools in Alabama are pretty much fully open, but there is an online public high school. It got started before the pandemic, but has kind of taken off. And she actually thrived kind of in the online environment because it gave her more flexibility in schedule. And she, like, her happy place and how she stays grounded and, you know, improves her mental health is she volunteers and works out at this farm that does therapeutic riding and all of that. And so because she's doing online, she has much more flexibility in her schedule. So she's out there like Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings and Tuesday, Thursday afternoons. You know, she's doing chores, she's helping with lessons, she's doing all these great things. And, you know, it's like I see her confidence just has blossomed and all sorts of great things. And she wouldn't be able to do that if she were in a traditional school. So,
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to close rooms.
All right.
And so people are going to start zooming back in. You're muted.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
I wonder how they came up with the name Zoom and how many focus group meetings they had. Should we call ourselves Wham or Blam or Zoom. Yeah, because that's what people do. And when you think video, you think not at all.
Hey, who knows?
Why didn't they call their company Connect? Because that's what we're really doing.
Probably because something else had that name already.
Mhm. That's why you have lawyers.
Yeah, but they didn't know, Zoom did not know that they were going to take off this much.
It's probably Matt's fault.
What did I?
I don't know.
Well, the next time we do
It's
a
always
session,
my fault. I'll
can't
take
wait
it.
till we-
Whatever.
I can't wait till we do this in person. The next time we're gonna have Denise and I have a session. We're just gonna say, come to our session to get picked on.
Yeah.
Come to our session and learn weird facts about your fellow attendees and laugh a lot and get picked on.
Why wait to go drinking at night when you can have fun during the day, finding all their sort of stories about concerts and all right.
Oh, yay, another cat has joined us. Debbie,
Oh.
who's your coworker, Debbie?
So this is Lily. She decided to join the meeting.
Good. I'm always a fan of gingers. So
Let's see if you can get a good picture, good shot.
There we go.
hey.
I'm sure that cat actually heard Alvin data. Well, I'm in.
Exactly.
Because all cats
Yeah.
want to know about Alvin data.
Of course.
Yes, because they want to be in a submersible at the bottom of Challenger
Yeah.
Deep.
Right.
What would that be like, having a cat in a bubble glass and some like weird ass oops, did I say that? Can I say that?
They become
Yeah.
crazy.
Person, a little lanternfish like goes by and they'd be like, okay, that's different. Hey, so we had, without naming names, there's some breakout groups that had trouble at identifying data sets that might need some little conservation love. Did anybody have trouble with the identification part of candidate data sets? Well, I know you guys did, but any other people who didn't follow directions?
Ouch. Well, so
Okay, so before you get all offended about not following directions, how often, Danny, do Steve and I not follow directions? Pretty much
no.
always.
I
So-
appreciate that. So I will say there's a distinction between sort of classes of data sets and the specific collection that you can identify by name or by some feature that you can say, I can put a finger on it. So I guess it depends on what you were talking about with identification. Like, we know there are classes of data sitting at Hui that pretty much every senior career person at Hui probably has some type of observational in situ cruise-based data set that they haven't digitized yet. It's a matter of tapping into those folks. You need like a sort of a data conservation day at Hui, or wherever that may be. Your affiliation of choice. Data conservation. Bring out your floppy drives.
Bring out your floppy drives. Bring out your
Right.
zip
Aaron, I told
disks.
you.
Bring out your zip disks. The
Well,
click of
did
death. Anyway.
so Danny, but as long as I got you on the hook, for example.
For example, our former lead PI of BecoDemo had a data set in 3-inch thick spiral bound notebooks. He also had some data that are sitting in which I did tag. So this kind of bleeds into the physical samples too. So we have a lot of plankton, both phyto and zoo, that are sitting in jars at Hui that are at risk. And, they don't even have enough metadata to tag them back to the co-located environmental data. But more importantly, those samples are, sitting in a probably a container somewhere, from the 80s and 90s or earlier. And so they really needed IGSNs, and they need connection to their cruise-based data. And so that's one corpus that I do know about, does exist. It's just a matter of getting the funding to do the work.
Well, this is interesting because it brings us into, what we're actually trying to do, which is to meet stakeholder needs. It's something that I think all of us in this session wrestle with. Oh, floppy disk.
3.5 or 5 1/4.
Yeah, mine's 3.5. I had to
excuse me
say.
while
I
read
have
this to the
I have
pad.
stuff on. I had stuff on 5 1/4. I never had
Hear
the,
me,
the
but you
big 10-inch
can't see
ones.
me. But I have data on my desk.
Oh, punch cards.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Methuselah Award goes to me. This is part of the imagery data set that exists right on a shelf above my head. So, and I'm going to say that the timeline for this is never. But I don't think it really adds. I'm pretty sure what used to be NCDC. Yeah, I think that's the right, or NGDC. That bathymetry has already been digitized a long time ago. And that's, another thing is, has this work already been done? And what is the marginal value to your stakeholders of you putting in all of this effort? For instance, in the Alvin case, we know that who he's got a lock on that, and with all of the film. And so if they don't do it, it doesn't get done. And if somebody wants to know, what that expedition was like in the future, the only people who have access to that, the resources and the expertise, elected not to. In this case, thank goodness they elected to do it. So I think that's wonderful. Yeah, Sean.
Find the unmute button. Yeah, well, it's interesting what you had mentioned. I think it's really important in this whole conversation to think about, has it been done before? Is that data already, someplace? But I think it's also important to also remember, it's not just has it been done before, but does it need to be done again? One of the largest marine data sets that exists in the world is curated by NOAA. It's the International Comprehensive Ocean Atmosphere Data Set. Most of the data was put into that data set in 1985 in the original production. They actually, going to what Steve showed, they actually differentiate the data sources as deck numbers because it was based on the concept of card decks from those days. But there's a huge push in the international community right now to reprocess the entire ICOADs from the source data, because some of the decisions made in 1985 are not the way the marine climate community would do that today. So, so when we're talking about, these big curation efforts, it's not just, has it been done, but has it been done to the standards we would want to have it done today?
And so I just dropped this in chat, but this is another reason why I personally prefer to use the term data conservation rather than data rescue, because conservation is ongoing. Rescue implies that you can finish it. And that is not necessarily the case. It's like, I know of data that I have used that we've migrated from exabyte to, a solid state hard drive to, whatever is the next iteration. Because media changes, media deteriorates. And so these things do need to, you need to look at them continually to see, oh, wait, what leading practices are around now that weren't around when we started with this? Or, what other part of the information might we want? It's like one of my favorite, or kind of, it's favorite, but it's kind of sad, was, somebody digitizing all of the information on handwritten card catalog cards. And once they didn't keep the scans of the handwriting. They just digitized the actual information and tossed the cards. They just threw out handwriting samples, a massive quantity of handwriting samples. So, you know, but sometimes you don't always think about what's necessary. What other kinds of data? So, you know, Danny brought up the great, you know, the retiring researcher who has, you know, stacks of 3-ring binders and, you know, the cassette tapes and floppies and zip disks that they have stashed in drawers and all of that. But what other sorts of data sets did some of you all talk about in some of your groups?
Come on,
John?
Val.
Or Val?
Well, I work at a sample repository, so there's oodles and oodles of data that need to be collected or assessed or cleaned in order to make them shareable. So just an example that came to mind, just kind of to get ideas going, is just that there are physical properties data that are routinely collected on sediment cores nowadays. And the collection that I work for has cores that either one, that's never been collected on them, or two, the data are collected, but they are in various states of disarray and need attention to make them cleaned up and then shareable to the community. And I know that this is a community priority because I've had scientists talk to me about it and that they would like to see it happen. And then in parallel, I know that there are plans to develop a proper digital data repository for these things, assign DOIs to them, be like, this is the hub for collecting this kind of information. And I know that structure is in the works and funded. So the middle piece is we need to either get the data or we need to, from cores from long, long ago, post-moratorium, or clean up this data that are sitting on various drives of backups of computers that need some work. So
metadata archaeology, Val.
yes, yes.
Ask you a question. You know, this is something that I think in our daily lives, we have weekly meetings in our group and we assess, you know, what's most urgent to do, given the fact that we have limited resources and limited time, and we've quite frankly limited attention span. You know, we can be really good at doing some data, but we can't be really good at doing all the data all the time at the same quality and bringing it into use. So there's the prioritization, and there's something that you brought up that hadn't occurred to me that we do all the time, which is we're listening to our stakeholders, listening to our community, and we're assessing what they're saying and being discerning about that, right? So somebody could say, I really want this data set because I want to work on something specialized. And you immediately go, okay, tell me more because I'm about to kick this down on my priority list, as opposed to, you know, this is we have a guy here at Scripps that took some seismic measurements in the Bay of Bengal. And there have been graduate students for decades that have wanted these data because they read about them in journals. And he finally, to our director, opened the drawer of paper data and said, I retire tomorrow. Can you come get this and digitize it? And right, exactly.
That's an effort. Like that is someone's time, and like, yeah, it's a lot.
It's his career. It's
Not
his
minimal.
entire career
Yeah.
that everybody's wanted these data. And he decided, I'm 80, I think I'm done with it. And so you open the drawer, where do you go from there? You know, how, so in the Flint case, we resourced it just off, you know, largely from CODATA and ESET and RDA having groups of experts who could come in and look at the data for free. That's one way to research things. With the Alvin, the Hui Library Group knew of, you know, CLEAR, and they knew that there was a rescue video grant funding that they could use to actually get money to pay a vendor to do it. So there's many different ways to resource this, but when you're talking to your stakeholders and assessing that, is there kind of, can we set up like a decision tree or something? Because this doesn't exist. Every group that goes out that wants to do this conservation, this rescue, this improving access starts from scratch. And they're really flying by the seat of their pants. One of the things that we want to end or at least accelerate the process of getting through this. So you can read a story about somebody else who's done this, give you, yeah, maybe I should look and see if there's so many grant funding opportunities. There's probably a bunch I don't know about, rather than just start from scratch.
Yeah. So there's a great comment in chat about how do we avoid having this very same problem in conversation in 50 years or even in 10 years, let's be honest.
Yep.
So part of that, I think, is kind of wraps back to one of the things that we're talking about is development and adoption of something, even if it's not the rights and responsibilities that we've started, something like that to make it more a part of our culture, as well as elevating the role of data and data professionals. I think it's key to do both. Yay, Val, you've got a comment?
Oh, yeah,
Go
yeah,
for
yeah.
it. Yeah.
I'm just excited to talk about it. Go.
Yes. Oh, good.
I have a comment, but I'll get it.
Yeah. So I can't say we're not going to have the same problem in 50 years. I hope we don't. I hope we have new and exciting problems in 50 years. I always like to say, I love it when people share their failures because we can learn from them, because I don't want to make the same mistakes. I want to make new and exciting mistakes. And I see the same thing as we're looking at data conservation. Let's not make the same mistakes. Let's make new mistakes. But that involves culture change. And that is something that is not always quick. But your involvement in conversations like this, your involvement in helping us develop these rights and responsibilities, and your help in getting those adopted and people to start really living into them will help us get closer to not repeating the same mistakes of the past. All right, so Val, I know, has a comment.
Yeah, so I've thought about this a lot.
I know you have.
I would just love to see at some point where, when there's these big projects and people are coming together and figuring out what they want to work on, that they also include someone who's kind of in a data stewardship role and think of them as one of their team members, like at the same level as PI.
Yes, I fully support that.
Did anybody write that down, what Val just said?
I am writing that down.
Or are we going to record this and put it in a PSA between football games? Hey, we should have a data steward in every science team. Just saying. And then the more you know.
Yes. All right, Val, is that?
That's it.
The sum. Okay, so Steve, you very
Yeah, I have
kindly
my
raised your
hand
hand.
up. I'd like to be recognized by the floor.
The floor, I cede the floor to you.
I heard the thing with data stewardship, and I may know something about that. But one of the suggestions, Sean, that directly gets at this, and one of the reasons that we're having an ESET session is that ESET is uniquely qualified and resourced to do a particular thing. There's a data management training warehouse in data stewardship, right? It serves for just that purpose, right? 30 or 50 years from now, people who've done data management can go and, there's a library of things that, the access to which can always be improved, but it's pretty robust resource. We, through our co-data lives, and I always said, we're doing the same job with different badges, we can bring these stories together. But in a little collaboration with ESET's data stewardship, we can make a library of this type of information available. And it's much more useful to ESET members who will be doing the work. That's the difference in this call, as opposed to when you're on a co-data call, and I hope there's nobody here from co-data, people that talk about doing the work. And I'll stand behind that and go on record. They're just different communities. There's lots of people that will set the priorities and say, we need to have surface meteorological data that goes back 50 years. And Sean Smith somewhere is going, good luck with that. Also pay me. But I think that for the people who settle down once that's resourced, you're exactly right. They're going to need a starting point. And I say that we make this available through data stewardship within ESET, that it's the place to come for this type of information. And we link this information in, this talk, not talk, this session, the slides, the results, all of this, so that the very meta about meta is information people can find as the starting point, even if it's a little messy. People had this discussion, you know, Val Stanley, the famous, by 30, 50 years, Val will be famous. And and then I'll say, well, I knew her when she, like, the first spark of brilliance occurred. And she said this thing. And so when people are starting to think about this, we'll save as much of this material as we can, Denise and I, and organize it. But I think making it partially, that it'll have a mirrored presence in data stewardship and should be findable. Because people will come to data stewardship looking for places to start.
Right. And so I think that's all important things. It's like writing, documenting these things. I think we mentioned Steve and I and several others put together a session at AGU a few years ago called Dirty Stories of Data Rescue. And this was we want the ugly side. We don't want the pretty. We want where you struggled, how you got through that. And I think some of this, it kind of ties to what Matt just put in chat there about data mobilization workshops. Those, that whole process is not pretty, I'm sure. I would love to have you share a little bit about some of your experiences with that and share what worked and what didn't, and make that available to others who might want to do these data mobilization type workshops. The way we get through a lot of this is sharing our struggles. Oh yes, love you. Thank you so much. And that's the thing. I will harp on one thing that you did say. I would like you to consider, instead of using the term best practices, to use the term leading practices. Best practices implies it's done. And as we've been talking about today, none of this is ever done. Leading practices implies this is the best we can do right now. And sometimes people get put off by the term best practices because they feel like if they can't meet them, why should they even bother trying? Leading practices gives the impression that there's going to be grace, because something is better than nothing. This is one of the things that's hard for all of us, dealing primarily with legacy data as I do. Something is better than nothing, because once you have the something, it becomes easier to find the next something. So that's just, I have personal little crusades, and one of mine is changing people from saying best practices to leading practices. Because
Denise, I've thought about this, and it's a lot like having a teenage kid.
Yeah.
A teenage kid you're trying to keep away from social media. And so one of the things with social media that we find out is you have to say stuff. I heard a person say this, and this applies to best as opposed to leading practices, is you got to watch it because you're comparing your blooper reel to their highlight reel.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. Your worst. I mean, that gets back to our icebreaker, right? Your worst stories from when you're embarrassed, and that's always front and center in your mind. But the only thing you see in social media, and usually, is people putting out there, this was the time that I had sushi, and then I was a lead guitarist for, Kid Rock. And then that same night, I fell into $1 million at the slot machine, and then I played roulette and baccarat, and I went home and I didn't sleep for 20. And you're like, wow, my life isn't really that exciting. So before we go, so Denise and I have had an informal little present for you called 30 minutes. This session is supposed to go for 2.5 hours. So we got to lean at the tape moment with our next breakout session. And it leads directly from the discussion that we're having now, which is to go back into the breakout. So we're going to copy yet another slide. So there's a little bit of administrative work to do. And the people that had problem identifying data sets, don't worry, this is your moment. This is where you're going to, because you're going to pie in the sky this bad boy and say, you know, if I was running data rescue and conservancy, these are the things that I would say are the tenets that have to be followed. Like, how do we resource? We want to bullet point things like, if we're going after a data set that really needs some work, we got to resource it. Then we have to identify expertise in the network of expertise of people that we know so that we can get them involved in this. And then we have to set an expectation, a threshold for how usable these data will be. This is the type of information we want in the next breakout. And you can kind of ruin this by asking for too much instruction, because these are things that Denise and I haven't thought about. We realize that there's such expertise in ESET, we don't want to squander that. And so we want you to freestyle it for maybe 15, let's go 20 minutes. But start wrapping it up at 15. You have the same guidelines. Make a copy of the slide, identify a person to write things down. But in this one, we want to do something a little bit different. And the instructions for the breakout are there, is to how to not only determine the priority of the data sets, but other aspects of successfully bringing these data into better use through improved access and reusability. So we're going to go back into the breakout rooms, set your own priority, and then start to name some things, even if you're just randomly seeing what sticks to the wall about resources and expertise and personnel and scope and all kinds of other things, and see if you can come up with a little bit more of a refined model of improving data access and reusability, some things that we have to have in there. Because right now, again, each team starts from scratch and kind of feels their way around the room, and that's very inefficient. That inefficiency gets multiplied for every group that takes this on, and we want to have a resource where experts like you have thought about it and said, maybe start in this way. Okay.
All right. Recreating the room, you're gonna just be random again. So thank you so much for being an active participant. So Zoom off.
Ready, set, go.
We've had to have a couple of people drop off, I think.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's always a good sign when they sign off, in the chat.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. Susan sent me a message saying she had to go pick up her boys. So is Sean not going into a breakout?
I don't know.
Seems to still be hanging out here, and I don't know
And
who
do you want
are.
to pause the recording while folks are in breakout?
For this one, yeah. I think we actually talked about some interesting stuff in the last one.
This meeting is being recorded.
Here we go.
You look confused, John.
Yeah, just trying to find my tab with the Kiko chat page on it. I got too many tabs open.
I can send
learned,
it.
So I learned something fairly recently. With Chrome, you can name your groups. First off, you can group tabs, and you can also name your windows. Like, you can change the name of like a group of tabs and call it ESET meeting. So I like have all my ESET meeting in one window. So it's a little easier for me to find.
But only a little.
But only a little, because I think I still have, how many windows? I wonder how many windows do I have open? I probably have about 15 windows open, all with multiple tabs in them. So yeah.
So as long as we're talking about this, I gotta have a public service moment. Has nothing to do with anything, but has anybody ever had the annoying thing of having a tab open with a YouTube video and you can't find it? You're about to start a Zoom meeting and you go, don't they have a thing, which my tabs is making noise? Kill it.
And I shut them off. Yeah.
And you end up closing the whole browser and then you lose all the work that you were doing.
Yeah.
And you go, Chrome, Mercator also. So yeah. So I was only able to get into one of the breakout groups, and I'm glad that you guys had such a wide lane to drive in, because the creativity that I've seen in some of the, all the slides. First of all, you guys broke through the skull and crossbones barriers, so yay for breaking the rules.
I'm proud of you all.
We love
You are
rebels.
our people.
You guys saw that and just plowed right through. You're like, I'm putting my slide here. They wanted me not. They wouldn't have put up skull and they wouldn't have given me a rule to break. But the second thing is, and this is one of the things that came out of Breakout Room, I think 4, is starting with the end in mind and getting, the data have to go into a repository. And I was so blown away with that as a thing that's written down. As a person who's involved in a repository, you think it'd be second nature, but not so much. And there may be data rescue, data curation efforts that are only done to further someone's career. And that may well, yeah, this is what happens when you're broadcasting from, wherever you are. People bother you. But yeah, that would be, and so I think that there's a whole host of other obvious things that haven't been thought about. And I was telling that group that in addition to Denise and myself, there's 2 other co-chairs. One is involved more in the German library system, and the other, Shaili, is in India, and she works in city planning, and she's the data scientist for community resilience. We're in very different fields in code data, and so we're trying to kind of see where these things cross over and where the commonalities are in going after data sets that aren't being used as actively as they should be. So before we actually land this plane, does anybody have something that came out of one of their breakouts that they think, well, you know what, this is a real diamond that you don't know about? We're going to share it right now.
I kind of do. Yeah, we kind of came upon this idea that really the most important thing to get into a standardized form is actually the metadata, and that the data itself just needs to be digitized and accessible. And then, because that way people can find the data, and then from there, they can do whatever they need, but really it's like that, the metadata that's going to connect it to the world. So that was a little bit of an aha moment.
Yeah, I like that. The discovery metadata, I think a lot of times when I'm frustrated and looking for data, it's the fact that there's no discovery metadata. So I can't hit a target at all.
Yeah, I think Rebecca.
If the data were just in a container connected to that metadata, I'd have a place to start. So yeah, great. Matt.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great way to start. One of the things that our group came up with towards the end was, instead of, so ESEP in collaboration with EarthCube have been doing data help desks at the big international conferences, but maybe take that one step further and bring us your data workshops. Get AGU or the big conference folks to dedicate 2 conference rooms for the entire session for the entire week. This is where you go in and get repositories to talk and work with scientists to get their data actually aligned, because those data help tests were amazing, but it wasn't enough time. It was just starting the conversation, and it definitely takes a bigger effort. So kind of taking that to the next level.
You're right. That's one half the conversation, is people coming and saying, do you know about these data and can you connect me with this data set? The other half is, I think that this is something that, I hope she's not gone. She might be. She was in Breakout 4, but this is something, and I can't remember her name. boy, I'm really remiss, was that you have to have the full up conversation. Debbie, do you remember who I'm talking about?
Nadia.
Nadia, thank
Nadia.
you. Yeah.
Nadia's still here.
Nadia's still here?
Yep.
Oh, there
she's-
you are. You're a static picture. I didn't recognize, the bangs. It's different. But yeah, having a full conversation about bringing the data into use includes not only a repository and all the decision trees that go along with finding the right repository, but also, and this is something that I think many of us are active in, kind of full stack curation, is not only leading the horse to water, but having a trough full of water there, getting them to drink, getting the drink in the right format, getting the discovery data about the drink into the repository, so that when that job is done, bringing the data from the data producer in, then the stakeholders you don't even know about can benefit from that work. And I think that that's what the agencies, they don't talk about it directly, but I think that's what they really want is for these jobs as in the using data rescue properly, then it is done.
Mhm.
And done for now. Any other things? And sorry, Nadia, for not seeing you. I feel like I couldn't make it in the movie Avatar because I don't see you.
Oh, I have my
Dan-
camera turned off. Sorry.
Yeah.
No,
Dan-
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan has his hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about in group 3 is if we're talking pie in the sky and we got we're going to get exactly what we want, is we want or we would love to see departments hire an actual full-time data steward, in a big university, have a position like a faculty or staff position that is their job is to manage data in the department, and there's enough data going around and enough scientists that are collecting all this data and they don't have the time or want to do that I think it'd be easy to sell to at least some universities that it's worth their money to hire people who are specialists, and that's their job, is to help do that. And you could even sell it as an equitability thing because access to data is more equitable, so you can really get into the selling it there.
Yeah. Well, and as more open data initiatives are implemented and actually followed, there's a strong case for having people like that. You can start. One of the things that I've always really wanted to do, and I know that there has been some work, is the idea of return on investment for doing efforts like this. I've always looked at it more specifically from the idea of dragging legacy data into a more permanent, accessible format. But you could probably make the same argument for more recently generated data and data products. But you could also maybe start making, if you want to bring in that whole equity, is not only making that data available for other researchers, but making that data accessible in ways for other people who need it, whether they are government officials, whether they are community members, whether they are, whatever other role or identifier they have, but start to make that data, truly start making that data more equitable in its access and usability. We've been working on this stuff for Flint. Some of that data is available, but the community who needs to know what that data means, they have no idea, and they have no way to get to understanding what that is with the data in its current format.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to change the definition of impact factor to be a metadata point, where it's like, these are now tags for, these are the people that this could most likely benefit.
Oh, I would love that. It's like that. I know NSF grants, usually when you're writing one of those, you have to talk about broader impact, but it's often kind of a secondary consideration in grant writing. just by the nature of how people generally work through these things. But yeah, wouldn't it be great if part of your reputation had, like your impact factor was on the broader community, or my data has been used to make decisions, at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level, at the international level. Yeah.
Hey,
Oh,
I wanted
yes.
to make good on our promise to give time back. Nothing's more annoying than a session that goes over, and nothing's better than a session that runs under time. So, so in order to get that time back, please feel free to keep this, the link to your slides. If something comes up and you think about it, drop it in there, even if it's an unfinished thought. Also, take this conversation as appropriate into other sessions, and keep the thought process going about broadly improving data access and reusability. This doesn't have to be limited to just this session or just this group. I think that that's something that ESET, it's a value that ESET has as its core, is that we want to see earth science data used not only by the stakeholders who work in earth sciences, but also by people we don't even know that they're looking for this data. Maybe they want to improve conditions in their communities. Maybe they want to do more education and they want to do outreach into elementary schools. All of those things have at their core the necessity to have these data in some usable form and easily discoverable. So if there's something you feel inspired to drop into the notes, you can drop a message to me, to Denise. We're pretty well known throughout ESET, so if you have our email address, just scream into the wind and we'll respond. But whatever it takes, let's keep this conversation going. We are planning on popping up in various other places. There will be a version of this at EGU. There will be a version of this conversation at the International Data Meeting in India in June. There will definitely be an in-person version of this in Pittsburgh in the summer. And I'm going to let Allison just follow up with a little bit about the summer meeting.
Well, before we pass it briefly to Allison, I have one last request. In the slides and the notes, there should be a link to a survey about what I talked about with the rights and responsibilities. And essentially, this is your opportunity to say, yes, you're on the right track, but this is what you've missed, or consider this. It shouldn't take that long for you to complete. And I think I said it so you can skip questions if necessary, but I would love to have more input on this. This really was kind of a very first stab. Like, what groups am I missing? What rights and responsibilities would you like to see outlined under various things? So please, I encourage you, please fill that out. I know we're all surveyed out, but hopefully this one isn't terrible. So I would appreciate you filling that out as well. All right, so any closing notes from Allison, a little bit about the Pittsburgh meeting or any other housekeeping?
Yeah, Pittsburgh, the plan is to be in person. We will be updating that via the Monday updates and the general channel in Slack. Those are the two best spots if you're looking for ESET updates. Otherwise, you can also follow us on Twitter, and that's where most of the information will be coming. So in person, Pittsburgh, it's the week of July 18th, I think.
Also join Slack. There's lots of good information in Slack. The data stewardship channel will be of use. Community resilience. I believe the community data channel is still open, even though that cluster kind of folded into the community resilience. Also join the ESET Pets channel on Slack, please. I want to see pictures of all your pets because that helps make you all human and real. And when I know that you're human and real, I have a better connection, and we all do better work when we have better connections. So All right. Enjoy your bit of extra time, and I'm sure I'll see you all at the research showcase coming up. And if not, if I don't see you there, then I'm sure I'll see you in the next few days in other session. You're
Everyone.
free.
Thank you.
Fly away.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all. You all are the ones that made this session great.
Yep, definitely.
That